We've hit a major milestone, our 200th training title. And to celebrate, we're covering a topic that's all about, well, not getting hit. It's fitting that for number 200, we're tackling line of fire hazards, one of the most fundamental concepts in workplace safety. This course gets to the heart of our mission, providing the crucial awareness needed to sidestep danger, whether it's a swinging load or a flying wrench. Think of it as our way of making sure you're still around to see our 300th title. Enjoy.
You're entering the line of fire, or at least a training about it. If you feel like a duck in a shooting gallery, relax. You're not a target, but you're most likely one at your workplace and, more times than you realize. Heck, you're in the line of fire every time you cross a street. Or you could be if you didn't check that a car wasn't barreling towards you, right? Think about it. Okay, so we're going to be looking at what it means to actually be in the line of fire. And listen, being in your boss's line of fire, that doesn't actually count. We're talking about safety here. All the times that you cross paths with potential danger, or vice versa. Those who don't know what to look for or how to stay out of the line of fire can find themselves like a deer in headlights. Suddenly you're in danger and you're too shocked to get out of the way. But listen, that won't be you. Let's get started first with a line of fire overview. Now, line of fire might sound like you're standing in the crosshairs of a rifle, and that is kind of the fundamental idea. But look, make no mistake, being in the line of fire at work can actually be just as dangerous. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, it's one of the main causes of workplace death, excepting transportation incidents. So what does it mean exactly? Well, line of fire is actually shorthand for any hazard where you're physically in harm's way. Now, although we'll reference the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, a lot in this training, you won't find this term in OSHA regulations specifically, but they are in a lot of the resources. It's a handy category used for a variety of risks, regulations, and tips that are aimed at keeping you safe from the hazards that are around you. Now, these dangers, they can exist anywhere, although they're most common in construction and manufacturing. But if you're not working in these areas, don't think you're safe. I'm going to challenge you today to think about your own particular workplace and how you're in the line of fire throughout. So, how many you encounter actually depends on the task that you're performing, the equipment that you're using, and the positioning of objects around you at any given moment. Staying safe's all about recognizing and then avoiding that line of fire. Okay, so in this course, we're going to cover 3 types of line of fire hazards, and you'll notice that there are some subcategories that I'll add in here for you. You have struck by, caught in or caught between, and then released energy. So as we go forward, I want you to consider these 3 keys to safety. First, always be aware of the hazards around you. Second, understand the machines and operations in your work area. And then third, I want you to think about the consequences of where you place your body before you take any action. Let's zoom in on the first line of fire topic, struck by hazards. You ready? Now look, this might sound kind of basic, and I promise I'm not insulting your intelligence when I say this, but anytime a moving object hits a worker, that's a struck by incident. Make sense? So you're in danger when you're in the path of a rolling, flying, swinging, or a falling object. Struck by hazards are a leading cause of death, especially again in the construction industry, but everywhere else as well, it's a potential hazard. I mean, ain't that why Mom taught us to look both ways before crossing the street? Forget about it. Or actually, don't forget about it. Struck by hazards are going to take 3 forms. One is vehicles. So when you cross the street, you start from, I presume, a safe place. And you only have to look in 2 directions before proceeding, right? In the workplace, vehicles can actually come at you from different directions, and they can pose some pretty significant risks. You could be hit by, say, a swinging backhoe. You could be mashed under a tipped machine, or you could be struck by an oncoming forklift. Anyway, OSHA regs are there to protect both the operator and anyone in the line of fire with standards for seatbelt use, safety checks before each shift, braking systems and warning devices, especially for backward movement. Vehicles with cranes, power shovels, forks, loaders, or anything else that could lead to falling materials need to have a cab shield or canopy to protect operators. Now, to improve your safety, you should learn how the vehicles around you work and what's required for safe operation. For instance, operators, they've got to secure vehicles when parked, move lifted and lowered components to a neutral position after use, and also ensure that everyone's clear before using dumping or lifting devices. They're not supposed to move in reverse unless they have an unobstructed view, an audible reverse alarm, or if another worker is signaling when it's safe, right? They're spotting them. For your own good, though, I want you to exercise caution by moving out of the line of fire, not into some other dangerous area though, regardless of the circumstance, and avoid walking behind moving vehicles. Don't assume the operator can see you. And again, look before you leap, right? Make sure you know that where you're headed is also safe. Now, what about falling or flying objects? Well, you do risk being hit by a falling object pretty much anytime you're below a crane, scaffolding, or an overhead work area, or even a walkway. Do you ever get a sense of impending danger if someone's working above you, or maybe if an overhead crane's coming your way? Yeah, well, there's a reason for that. It's a big no-no. Stay out of the line of fire. Get it yet? So you also risk being hit by a flying object whenever you use, say, power tools, or you need to push, pull, or pry to complete a task. Have you ever maybe felt that kickback from a pry bar or another tool that's used with leverage in mind? Yeah, even in your own hands, those suckers can fly if you're not using proper precautions. So look, in general, wear a hard hat. Stack materials carefully so that they're stable, and use protected devices to keep flying or falling objects from hitting people. You should also know how to safely operate power tools, and really any tool, and wear protective gear on your eyes or face if there's any possibility at all of flying debris. Don't skip the step of performing inspections to ensure protective guards are in good condition, and keep cautious just in case they do fail. Take especial care not to walk under any loads that are being lifted by a hoist or crane. I mean, anything, right? If you're an operator, you gotta make sure you block off hazardous areas and post appropriate warning signs. Inspect components to ensure wires, chains, and hooks are all in good shape, all your rigging, etc., and stay within the equipment's lifting capacity. This is huge. Now, if you're doing overhead work, secure all your tools and materials. Use those tow boards, screens, and guardrails on scaffolding and walkways. This is gonna keep things from falling. You can also use nets, catch platforms, or canopies. This again stops things from hitting people. Just because you're not in danger doesn't mean there's not a line of fire situation here. If you're working with compressed air, keep the pressure at 30 psi or at manufacturer specifications. Use the guarding and protective equipment, and never clean clothing with it. Look, that might fly in the cartoons, but not in the workplace. Another area of importance is when you're working with masonry walls. So let's say you're on a construction site. Masonry and concrete walls are especially dangerous because they bear really heavy loads, and they can easily crush or kill someone if they fall. Only those who are essential and actively involved in the work are allowed in this type of area, and only a qualified person can determine whether the structure can actually support a load before it's placed. There are standards for shoring and bracing, and for testing that concrete has the sufficient strength prior to installing any permanent support. Let's not forget a whole other type of falling object that can have devastating consequences: falls by people. In fact, slips, trips, and falls are actually some of the most common causes of death, and the hazards that cause them are present across occupations. All right, so not to make too light of the situation, but you've survived so far without being struck or crushed with all the info I've been throwing your way, right? Let's move on to caught in or caught between hazards. Caught in or caught between hazards are really the stuff of nightmares. Maybe you've heard the stories. A factory worker's sleeves caught in a moving part. It pulls in her hand and then her arm, mangling them beyond recognition. And excavators trapped underground with no way out after the walls caved in. Or a man's dragged by a piece of jewelry into an MRI machine, ending in his death. Caught in or between incidents occur when someone's pinched, crushed, or caught between a moving object and a fixed object, or between two moving objects. Now, unlike the struck-by incidents we talked about, these trap the person under unbearable weight or within circumstances where they're battered repeatedly, and oftentimes they're drawn further into the hazardous situation. They could suffer an injured body part, or worse, amputation or even death. There are three main types of caught in or caught between hazards. One would be being pulled into or caught in machinery or equipment. Then you've got being crushed or flattened between sliding, rolling, or shifting objects. And a final main type is having walls cave in when you're working in an unprotected excavation or trench. The first instance occurs because machinery and power tools have moving or rotating parts that require regular maintenance to be safe. They've got to be properly guarded so that clothing or body parts don't get caught in the moving components. And they also need to be de-energized, what we call locked out, when the repairs are occurring so that they don't start up unexpectedly, which really poses the same risk. Now listen, just because a machine's safe to operate, it doesn't mean that you'll operate it safely. You ever hear of operator error? Yeah, huge problem. You need to understand how a machine or tool works, where the safety features are, and how to turn it off immediately in case of emergency. You should know how to position yourself, where to put your hands and feet, and what not to do when you're operating that machine. If anything's unclear or unstated, and you've not been trained, or hey, it happens, maybe you forgot your training, ask questions until you're satisfied that you know enough to safely use the equipment. Never assume you automatically know these things, maybe just because you've seen somebody do it, or that safety guards and features are going to protect you. It's worth taking a moment and reassessing. And look, finally, you should be fully aware at all times. People have lost fingers during a moment's distraction, or worse. The second instance I want to talk to you about is similar to a struck-by situation. You've got to be aware of the line of fire in order to get out of the way. Make sure you're always at a safe distance and you're not positioned between moving materials and an immovable structure, or just as dangerous, between two moving items. You should also consider the swing radius of cranes and any other equipment. Now granted, your employer and operators of large machines have significant roles here, sure. They've got to mark or cordon off areas that are unsafe for you to be in and warn whoever enters a danger zone. But everyone should be trained to recognize and avoid these hazards. The third instance applies specifically to excavations and trenches. You should never enter an unprotected trench that's 5 feet deep or more. To be protected, it should have one of these characteristics. You ready? Sloping or benching is one. Sloping means you've cut the sides back at a safe angle to prevent collapse, while benching uses a series of steps to create that safe angle. There is guidance available based off of the soil profiles that you're excavating in order to make sure that this is safe. Then you've got the use of a trench box or shield. These are meant to protect workers if there's a cave-in, or really again to prevent them in the first place. You've also got shoring. So this refers to a variety of structures or systems that can help support the sides. Beyond all these protection characteristics, you should only enter or exit a trench or an excavation using a ladder, stairway, or an appropriately designed ramp that's located in the protected area. Similar hazards can also exist in what we call confined spaces. These exist across industries. I'm not going to poke my head into that topic today, but if your job's going to have you working in one of these areas, let your designated Atlantic training rep know, and we'll hook you up with the course you need to keep yourself and your coworkers safe and in compliance, okay? So, emerging from the cave, how about we take a deep breath and get ready to tackle the next line of fire hazard: released energy. So another line of fire hazard occurs when you're in the path of what we call hazardous energy, when it's released or could be released by a machine or an object. This can take any number of forms. So for example, a steam valve turns on automatically while being repaired, burning workers near the downstream connection. A jammed conveyor belt suddenly releases, crushing the worker who is clearing the jam. The wiring within a piece of factory equipment shorts, shocking or full-on electrocuting the tech who's conducting repairs. A machine malfunctions when a compressed component suddenly snaps, hitting the operator. These are pretty bad situations, right? Well, to avoid this type of hazard, you've got to use caution when you're working with pressurized systems, electricity, or spring-loaded high-tension machine components. Any of these could hit you or your coworkers hard enough to cause some serious injury. Now look, super importantly, the OSHA standard for the control of hazardous energy, we call it lockout tagout, for general industry is going to outline all the procedures for controlling various types of hazardous energy and preventing equipment malfunction. OSHA does place the responsibility on the employer, who's got to ensure careful and regular inspections and maintenance, and also the techs conducting these tasks are properly trained. Now, failure to follow these lockout tagout procedures can be extremely dangerous. So let me remind you again, it's everyone's responsibility to make sure that the control of hazardous energy procedures are followed and in place. Okay, so admittedly, that's a lot. Hopefully you've been thinking about how all of this applies to your unique work situation, your work environment. So we're going to be winding up with some awareness and safety techniques that you can then use to break free from line of fire hazards. You still with me? Let's go. We've gone over measures to prevent specific line of fire incidents. Now, I'm not sure if you noticed, but these are strongly aligned with what are commonly known as OSHA's Fatal 4. Sometimes we call them the Focus 4. That'll be falls, struck by, electrocutions, and caught in or between. Sounds serious? Yeah, well, maybe they are. But with so many ways to be in the line of fire, how can you safely get through a workday without missing something? After all, there are potential dangers, whether from coworkers, gee thanks, or from moving objects and machinery around every corner, not to mention overhead. I don't want to make you paranoid, but I do want to make you aware. Line of fire injuries come down to being in the wrong place at the wrong time, something that you definitely want to avoid. One way to simplify your efforts is to develop what we call situational awareness. Now look, this also is huge. Situational awareness, being mindful of your surroundings and when they're unsafe. Think of whole areas that pose risks as zones of danger. There are many things that your employer should be doing, from providing training, like this one, to following OSHA safety regulations and procedures that reduce the line of fire hazards. Here are some techniques, though, that you can use to improve your own situational awareness and stay out of the zone of danger. Okay, listen to me. Learn to recognize and avoid hazards at all times, and don't rush through tasks. Never rush. Before starting a task, consider now what could go wrong and whether you or anyone else might be in harm's way. It's worth taking the time to consider. Look in every direction for objects that could hit or crush you. Keep all parts of your body out of places where something moving could crush or lacerate them. And never stand between a moving vehicle and a wall. It's called rocking a hard place. Make eye contact with the operator whenever you need to pass near the radius of moving equipment. Make sure they notice where you are, don't just assume. Carefully follow all safety policies and don't make exceptions or take shortcuts. Shortcuts are the bane of safe work. Be aware of your level of fatigue, stress, or mental health. You know what I'm talking about. Know when you need a break or whether you should get help. There is no shame to that game. You got me? And finally, I want you to keep your eye out for unmarked hazards and then do what? Walk away? No, report them. You got it? Great. All right, hey, congrats. Now you know all about line of fire hazards, what they look like, and why they're dangerous, and also steps that you can take to reduce your risk. As I said a couple times in this training, I want you to immediately go out, take a look at your own workplaces, and think about how you can apply what you've learned today. Can you recognize these hazards? What are the zones of danger? What about situational awareness? How do you apply that in your day-to-day tasks? I want you to go out, do your part to stay safe, keep others safe, and remember, always speak up if you see a hazard. All right, thanks for joining me today.
Congratulations on making it through the course in one piece. Thank you for your time and focus. The ultimate goal isn't just to pass a quiz, but to turn this knowledge into an instinct, spotting potential hazards before they become incidents. Remember, situational awareness is your best hard hat. Apply what you've learned every day, keep your head on a swivel, and stay safe out there.